The logic of economics is today creating that. So yes, we will get that political, noise. It happens. After all, there's been a very significant change of regime out there. But I also think we should not, sort of be so carried away that we forget that there are some very basic fundamentals which actually bind us together. And I think, when people get down to governance, let me tell you, governance is a very, very sobering experience for everybody. There is a reality check which comes from governance, and I have every confidence that, look, our relationship the fundamental soundness of that relationship will assert itself.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that response. So very wonderful answers on China, on Mahabharata, and on Bangladesh as well. I'd also like to tell you that at Flame, our educational philosophy encourages our students, in fact, to be global citizens with a global outlook, while at the same time being rooted in the Indian tradition. And congratulations on the positive developments we've had with China. In fact, when I was studying international relations, there was a Chinese proverb that I heard, that two tigers can't share the same hill. So I hope that someday we could. So I'd like to take 3 more questions. So I'm going to take one from each side. So let's take the next one from the right side here. Can we give it to her? The one there? Yes. Thank you.
Good morning, sir. So my question pertains to India and Canada. So recently, both India and Canada removed their diplomats from their respective countries. So in your opinion, how can this affect the current as well as aspiring students of India who want to pursue a higher education in Canada?
Let's take the next one from the left here.
Hello, sir. So for people like us who are passionate about foreign service or want to become like you in the future, what is one advice would you give us to stay motivated, especially when the process may seem more challenging?
Okay, and let's take one last one from the center for balance. Come. Someone from here?
Hello, sir. Namaste. So it's a privilege to be speaking with you here today. So my question was on the future of the multilateral system. I mean, there are n number of international violent conflicts happening right now, and while India is doing a lot to respond to them, the current multilateral system, to be frank, seems paralyzed to respond. A lot of countries like India has advocated for reform in the UN Security Council, but there just seems to be more challenges than we thought so. So what are those challenges, and what would ideally a reformed multilateral system look like? Thank you.
The Canada question might be a place to start. Look, frankly, for us, we see we are really completely sort of reject the manner in which the Canadian government targeted our High Commissioner and diplomats. Let's just look at what is the issue. What is the issue in a way is that there are a small minority of people there, but who have made themselves into what appears to be a bigger political voice. Okay, unfortunately the politics of that country is giving that political lobby, you can call it, perhaps a degree of play, which I would argue is not just bad for us and for our relationship, I would argue is also bad for Canada itself. Now, it isn't just, having a view. Many other things have happened in the course of the last few years. and as a result, you know, whether it's the kind of people who have gone there, the kind of activities which have been permitted out there, all these have actually had a negative impact on themselves. And now, today they are saying, you know, things about us. But if you actually look, who first raised the presence of organized crime in Canada? We were telling them. You know, we were telling them and they were not listening. So today, you know, they make out as though, well, you know, there's this thing happening out there. But it's happening because of a permissive atmosphere over a long time. But I do think that this is an issue with a particular political phase or a set of political forces. We would certainly not, you know, hope that, we would certainly hope that, you know, more sensible, more sober, more responsible thinking asserts itself. You know, both countries have a big economic relationship. You mentioned students. There are, you know, people of Indian origin who live out there. In fact, unfortunately, because of the security threats to our embassy, to our High Commission, even their travel got impacted, which we have, you know, now sort of stabilized. So we certainly on our side, you know, we have actually in many ways been the people who have reasoned with the Canadian system, saying, look, don't go down this extremist path. And I would hope that, you know, at some stage that realization is sharper and we find some, you know, some sensible solution. But obviously, you know, if our own national interest and, you know, the integrity and the sovereignty of our country is involved, I mean, it is very natural that we will take the position that we have done. On, you know, your question, how do you stay motivated? Look, I mean, it's important to have goals in life. Okay, it's important to have ambitions in life. Everybody must have something which drives them, which makes them work harder, which says, okay, and which you are testing yourself. You know. Now, you know, sometimes you realize it, sometimes you don't, sometimes you realize it fully, sometimes you don't, sometimes you realize it more than you ever expected it to be. You know, I never thought in my wildest dreams that I'd ever be a minister, but it happened. So, I think this is a phase of life where you are actually, you know, in a way testing yourself, motivating yourself. It's important to have, you know, friends and people with whom you can discuss similar things, because often it's you know, I say this as a father of 3 children, often you invite a lot of pressures on yourself during this period. So you need to have people to share it with and peer group to discuss it with. It certainly helps. I mean, if 4 people have the same set of issues they are looking at, let me tell you, it's obviously much lighter. Group, there's a certain group, not just group think, there's a certain group confidence and a group sharing which comes out of it. But I really wish you all the best as an aspirant. I mean, I hope one day to welcome you into the Foreign Service. So all the best. On the multilateral system, you know, here's an issue, and the current world order, you can say, it was the, you know, it was engineered, or the architecture is 1945. Okay. At that time, if you look at even the number of countries who signed the UN Charter, there were 51, of which some like us were not free. Okay. Now the number of members are 193. So, I mean, I tell people in any other domain, you know, say in a business domain, if a business had grown from 51 to 193, would you still say that the management board should remain the same management board of those 51 shareholders and not have the other 142 shareholders reflected in some? I mean, does that make any sense to you? But it is a reality, because those who sort of enter the door, there's the phenomenon, they close the door behind them. So the ones who are there, in many ways, are the ones who are most resistant to the change, because they want to safeguard the privileges. But what is happening is, you can say, an expanded enterprise with a narrow management is obviously then not able to deal with many other issues. So look at the big issues of our times. What is happening in Ukraine, what is happening in the Middle East, in West Asia, management of COVID, for example. Now, in all of these, what happens is, if the bulk of the countries feel that those in the room really don't speak for us, that they have their own interests, they have their own history, then you do your own thing, And those five also today are in a situation where they're continually blocking each other. So even in a limited way, there is a certain gridlock out there. So it is something we will keep pushing. We do feel that in a sense, the forces of history are with us. There is every time I go to the UN, I can see more and more people expressing their frustration. So at some point, it will happen. Now, it's a question of staying power and mobilizing power. And that's really what we are trying to do.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I'll let Gitika take the
Sir,
next
actually, it is really fascinating to see how India is approaching these global situations, because even here at Flame University, we are encouraged to approach these complex situations not in silos, but to actually understand how they actually interact and demonstrate themselves in reality. So I think it's very reassuring and rather encouraging for us to keep at it, because we can see the same principles are being applied even in leadership. So I think that's a really good takeaway for our students. Let's move on to the next question. Maybe we can have someone from the left here.
Good afternoon, sir. It's an honor to be interacting with you today. My question is, do all countries currently see India as the voice of the global south? And if so, then how can we see India advocating for these countries further?
Okay, we can have a question from the right.
Greetings, sir. It is an absolute honor to stand before you and ask this question. Thank you so much for this opportunity. My question is in line of the vision of many friends, few foes, greater goodwill and more influence, as described in your book, The India View, which also happens to be one of my favorite books. How can India really leverage its cultural diplomacy to enhance our foreign policy, to strengthen our international ties, and maybe explore and expand our global influence? How do you think we can utilize our cultural diplomacy? Thank you.
And we can have one from the center.
Hello, sir. I'm grateful for this opportunity. My question is in a slightly different light from the others. So we live in a globally connected world, and for those of us who maybe do not have a background in, let's say, international relations, we also play a role in shaping the image of the country through social media platforms, content creation platforms, and all of these technologically enabled sources. So how can we act as responsible citizens, and what's the most crucial thing that we should be keeping in mind when we're involved in these sorts of platforms?
So the first question on the voice of the global south. I think what do we actually mean by the global south? We largely mean countries who were colonized, who got their independence, or who are still developing, who would be largely a low-income country, okay? Because we sometimes get into these debates, people ask us, not always in a well-meaning way, okay, define global south. So there's those who are from the global south know they are from the global south because of all these experiences and criteria. Now, do we speak for most of them or all of them? I won't say, I'd be fair. I would say they have a high degree of trust and expectation in India, and with a reason. I can give you 3 examples. In much of the global south, the developing world, people do remember that during COVID, when the developed world was actually stockpiling vaccines, many of them got their first vaccines from India. And they got the vaccines from India when India was still vaccinating its own people. I cannot overstate to you the emotional impact of this on the world. In my travels, even now people bring it up, but particularly I would say the first year after COVID, I've had people with whom there's even a linguistic barrier. They spoke a language which I didn't, but they tried to come up to me and sort of tried to signal in some way that, sort of thank you for what you did. There are people who've been much more expressive about it. In fact, if you see, there are many world leaders, you will see them on YouTube, who really, and many of them actually become emotional talking about it. And that sense at that time, that look, the developed world turned its back on us, and were it not for you, because for a lot of these were very small countries. These were countries where 100,000 doses made the difference between life and death and survival of that particular society. So that was one example. A second example was actually Ukraine, where the widespread sentiment in the global south was, okay, you stood up and said what was to be said. We would have loved to say it. Unfortunately, our position didn't allow us. But believe me, actually, we share those sentiments. A third example would be during our G20. For many, many years in G20, the African Union wanted a seat. So every G20, and I've attended almost without break the last 11 of them, every G20 would begin like this. The first day of the G20, everybody tell the African Union, don't worry, during this meeting we'll take care of you. At the end of the meeting, when nothing happened, they'll say, sorry, this time we couldn't do, next time we will look at it. So they kept kicking it down the road. Now, the fact that we actually took up this cause and in many ways pushed it in a way in which everybody had to accept. So for a lot of especially the African countries, they do think that India has a sort of India has a conscience, India has a standing, India has a confidence today to put that across, take this up in a very public way, and at the end of the day, for them it's like you are such a large country with all those attributes that is what in their minds the voice of the global south is all about. It leads actually to the cultural diplomacy question, because it isn't just our size, our population, or our economic strength. Those are very critical attributes, but somewhere there is also that civilizational sense of India, a feeling that look, Indians, India takes a long view. You know, India is not plays a purely tactical game. That when Indians take positions, you know, it's thought through. It could be. Today, it could be when we are trying to urge a kind of a dialogue or diplomacy when it comes to the Ukraine war, or it could be when we, advocate something like millets or, yoga. And I think the cultural part of it is very much a very intrinsic facet of that civilizational image of India. Look around the world. There are, in modern days terms, there are not many nations which can say, I'm actually an old civilization which is a modern state. There are very, very few. And therefore it's important for us, quite apart from the fact that many of our cultural practices, frankly, have benefited the world. When I look in the last 10 years, how much yoga has actually spread in the world, it's amazing. I remember the pre-2015 period, where it would be a relatively marginal activity in a few countries. So it has actually become globally mainstreamed in a way, and people slowly understand that this is not just something purely physical. So that aspect of it is also getting through. And the last question, look, again, it's not my intention to say people who study international relations alone should look at the world. I actually have a pitch that I think everybody should look at the world. Today, a business person, a technology person, a famous, person, accomplished person in arts, let us say, all of them together actually build our, international image. As I said, one of the best things which happened, when you look at India-US, for example, one of the reasons why the relationship took up was because this image of this, the Indian techie, these are hard-working people, you can trust them, they are family-centric, they're responsible, contributing citizens. This is the kind of image today that we have. So even in countries where there are very, very fierce immigration debates going on, people actually like Indians. So I would argue that today, yes, people who obviously make IR a speciality have a particular attachment or expertise. But I would argue that in every profession, whatever you do, it's important to know the world. That if you look at the good periods of Indian history, our best periods were those when we actually forayed out and we understood the world. Some of our worst mistakes in history was when we didn't understand what was happening in the world, and we kind of allowed vulnerabilities and situations to arise.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that response. Yes,
last
sir.
round.
We take one last round. Okay, one last question, please. One last round? Yeah. Okay, sure. Let's take two more. Okay. Can we have a question from here? Someone there, in the corner there? Yeah?
Namaste, sir. It's an honor to be talking to you. My question is that we read a lot of books, and I read a lot of books, and I have read your book. My question is, what books do you read, and what are your recommendations for us?
Okay, let's take one from the left here.
Hello, sir. Thank you for interacting with us today. So my question for you is, as India and US plan to expand their collaborations in terms of technology, health or defense, what are some key areas where you see potential for growth, and what are some challenges that you think we need to navigate upon?
Okay, and let's take one from the center here. That's the last question.
Hello, sir. It's really an honor to be speaking to you. It feels like a dream. So I have a very light question as compared to the others. What is one question that everyone asks you wherever you go?
You know, that's a really hard question. So, look, I'm really very pleased to hear you say that about the books, because you know, it's a great habit, and even one of the nice things I must tell you about being a foreign minister or being a diplomat is, when you do these long plane rides, you spend a fair amount of time in airports, and you have those jet lag hours where you get up at 2 o'clock and can't sleep till 6. Books are a great help. You know, I mean, people today get information in different ways. I mean, I think it's partly, as I said, it's intergenerational. Someone like me still primarily uses, I mean, I do a lot of stuffing of stuff, but still for deep understanding, I would say, of a particular issue, it would still be very much books. A lot of what I read is like history, or current affairs. By the way, again, one of the things you've got to do as a minister is also to release people's books. Okay, that comes. Now I have a caution. I normally don't release a book if I've not read it, because you don't know, you know, what you may end up. So now here's the good part of it. So the more people press you to release books, more books you actually end up reading. So at the moment I'm in the midst of and sometimes I carry more than one book at a time. So I'm actually working on a set of books which I have to be releasing soon, so I won't actually give you the name. But one is like, you know, it's on economic choices which we have made in the past. The others is a pure history book related. Both will make news in their own way, I think. The India-US, you know, I do think that this relationship is now coming into its own, and it's got many strong things going for it. Somewhere there is today a certain fit which has happened. It's happened for a variety of reasons. You know, could be strategy, could be. I would still say it happened most of all because of people. And I'll give you a very interesting number, which I read, by the way, in a book. The number was that when Pandit Nehru first went to America, there were 30,000 Indian Americans. When Indira Gandhi first went as Prime Minister to America, when Pandit Nehru went, it was 3,000. When Indira Gandhi went, it was 30,000. When Rajiv Gandhi went, it was 300,000. When Narendra Modi went, it was 3.5 million. And now it's actually, if you add citizens and non-citizens, it's about, I think roughly people use 5 million as a ballpark figure. Now, it isn't just the numbers, it's also the connect. You know, what kind of people, what are the connects? And here's the interesting thing about Indians, and something we should feel proud of. Look, Indians may go anywhere in the world, they can be extraordinarily successful or not, but whether they are successful or not, they never forget where they came from. So you have many of these hyphenated communities in America, Dash Americans. Many of them actually, not all of them necessarily have a good relationship or a strong relationship back with their country of origin. I think Indians have that unusually strongly. And so to my mind, this people's connect which has happened, it has a great ability to really to shape this relationship. But if you look at other things, I think politically, strategically, even technology, we are moving into an age of AI, of electric mobility, of drones, of chips, of space, which all needs a certain set of talents and skills. And I would argue that globally there is a deficit of that. And if there is something which India can bring to the table. I heard Prime Minister actually say something very interesting yesterday. He was telling Chancellor Scholz, he said, the last century, countries grew by their control over natural resources. In this century, countries will grow by the quality of their human resources. And if you look at it, because this thought actually really stuck in my mind, because in that one sentence, the quality of, in fact, almost everything which Narendra Modi is trying to do eventually goes back to that. That if you look at all these, at the programs, that if your health is better, your nutrition is better, your education is better, you have electricity, you have water, you have housing, every part of it eventually feeds into the quality of human resources. So I would say that in a more technology-centric era which is coming, a more globalized era which is coming, one where the strategic alignments with the US would become stronger, I actually feel this is one relationship. It will not happen automatically. It will not be free of irritants and problems. It's natural. But it's one where I see very strong growth possibilities. So then we finally come to the question of questions. I don't know. It's hard really to think of a single question which people ask. It's also changed, My first few years as foreign minister, a lot of people would ask me saying, like, how did it happen? What does it feel like? How do you adjust to it? There were even people who asked me saying, why did you leave that high-paying job you had? So there's a little bit of it. I think it depends. TV interviewers get a lot into these trick questions. That's the one which I am a bit careful about.
Thank you, sir. Given that we are on the time constraint, we won't be taking any more questions. But thank you for conversing with us so candidly and bringing to light where we stand as India, where we as the youth of India stand today, and what is the way forward for us. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts for having this conversation with us. On that
Main Street, in a way, and people slowly understand that this is not just something purely physical. So that aspect of it is also getting through. And the last question, look, again, it's not my intention to say people who study international relations alone should look at the world. I actually have a pitch that I think everybody should look at the world.